We spend so much time worrying about fake news on our social media feeds, but what if those same misleading ideas are quietly seeping into the places we're supposed to trust, like our mainstream TV and radio news? A new report dug into exactly that, and honestly, what they've found is pretty wild. Let's get into it.
Okay, so first things first, we have to understand that the game has totally changed. We're not really talking about people flat out denying that the climate is changing anymore. The report calls this the new climate denial, and it's way more subtle. It's not about saying this isn't real, it's about saying things like, oh, the solutions are way too expensive, or they'll never work, or even it's all just a big plot to control us. It's a strategy designed to create delay and distraction, and as you'll see, it's working.
So how does this stuff even get onto our news? Well, the report uses this fantastic metaphor: the liquid information landscape. Just think about your own feed for a second. A random tweet can show up right next to a serious article from a major newspaper. Those old, solid lines between professional journalism and stuff anyone can post online, they're just dissolving. And that liquidity, that flow, creates the perfect channel for disinformation to travel from the fringes right into the heart of a mainstream broadcast.
So just how widespread is this problem, really? Well, a new investigation decided to map it all out. They analyzed television and radio news across 4 different countries: Brazil, Spain, France, and Poland, looking for any statement that could mislead the public about climate change.
And the final number they landed on? It's staggering. Across just those 4 countries, the researchers found this many separate, distinct instances of climate misinformation being broadcast on mainstream news: 815. Let that sink in for a second. That's 815 times that people tuning into what they thought was a credible source were exposed to false or misleading ideas.
But here's the thing, the problem isn't spread out evenly. Not even close. This chart shows a really shocking concentration. While a lot of news outlets are doing a pretty good job, you have this handful of channels like Sud Radio in France and Jovem Pan in Brazil that are just off the charts. They're broadcasting more than 2 false claims for every single hour they even talk about the climate.
And the investigation dug a little deeper and found this massive divide between public and private broadcasters. Look at this, the overwhelming majority of all that misinformation, we're talking over 85% of all the cases they found, came from private media channels. It really suggests there's a huge difference in editorial standards and who's being held accountable.
Okay, so who is actually saying these things on the air? This chart, which zeroes in on the European countries in the study, points to a major weak spot in broadcast news: the guests. Specifically, political guests. In both Spain and Poland, politicians who were invited onto these news programs were the #1 source of misinformation, making up over 40% of all the cases.
All right, so we know how much there is, we know where it's showing up, and we know who's spreading it. But what are the actual narratives? What are the specific stories they're telling to try and slow down climate action?
Well, it turns out that while the goal might be the same, the flavor of the misinformation is totally tailored to local politics and culture. Each country kind of has its own unique disinformation playbook.
Take Brazil, for instance. The narratives there are completely tied up in the national economy. The 2 most common false claims were all about defending the environmental record of Brazil's powerful agriculture industry, while at the same time painting any European climate standards as a hypocritical plot to hurt Brazilian business. It's this powerful cocktail of nationalism and deflection. And this isn't just some abstract idea. I mean, listen to this direct quote from a Brazilian broadcast. With rhetoric like this, they're not just questioning a policy, they're attacking the credibility of the environmental groups themselves, trying to frame them as some kind of profit-driven fear machine.
Now, the story in Spain is completely different. The report found very little climate misinformation there overall, which is great. But when it did pop up, it was odd. Specifically, the media there gave a surprising amount of airtime to the chemtrails conspiracy theory. The debunked idea that the trails behind airplanes are actually toxic chemicals being sprayed on purpose.
This quote from a Spanish broadcast is a perfect example of how these fringe ideas get laundered into the mainstream. The speaker is trying to sound credible by referencing Wikipedia, twisting a real concept, geoengineering, into proof of some secret evil plot. It's a classic disinformation tactic. So what about the other countries? Well, France was a huge hotspot with a whopping 665 cases. They often popped up during heated political debates over things like new low-emission zones. And in Poland, the playbook was different again. There, almost all the climate misinformation was wrapped up in anti-European Union rhetoric, framing climate policies as some big attack on Polish freedom and industry.
So, okay, the problem is clear, it's complex, and it's custom fit to each country. That leads to the most important question of all. What on earth can be done about it? The good news is, the report doesn't just point out the problems. It actually offers a path forward for journalism.
And right here, this might be the most hopeful and surprising finding in the entire report. You might think the solution is to just talk about climate less, to avoid all the controversy. But the data shows the complete opposite. There's a negative correlation. The more a news channel actually covers climate issues, the less misinformation it tends to spread. More journalism, not less, is the answer.
So based on that key finding, the report lays out 4 really clear recommendations for the media. 1. Train journalists so they can spot these new, sneakier forms of denial. 2. Be way more careful about who you give a platform to. Select real experts, not just people with loud opinions. 3. Make climate a consistent, daily part of the news cycle, not just something you cover when there's a hurricane. And 4. Establish real frameworks for accountability when someone does spread false information.
Which brings us right back to that idea of a liquid media world, where good information and bad information are all flowing together. The stakes here aren't just about the climate, they're about the future of journalism itself. So the final question is, in this new world, can the news industry adapt fast enough to stop the spread before our trust in it erodes completely?